Imagine buying a plant today, and still enjoying that same plant 10 years from now. Not because you kept replacing it. Because it never needed replacing. Every spring, millions of gardeners unknowingly fall into the same expensive routine. They fill their patios with colorful annual flowers, enjoy them for a few months, and then watch everything disappear with the first hard frost. The following spring, they buy them all over again. But the most experienced gardeners play a completely different game. Instead of planting for one season, they plant for the next decade. Some of these perennials actually become larger every year. Some multiply into free plants. Some bloom when almost nothing else in the garden is awake. And one of today's plants has become so dependable that many gardeners joke it survives better when it's ignored. By the end of this countdown, you'll understand why perennial containers often become the most valuable part of an entire garden. Let's start with a plant almost nobody notices, and that's exactly why it's so special. Plant 11 Carex, the secret behind professional container designs. Walk through a botanical garden. Don't look at the flowers. Instead, look at what surrounds them. Notice the graceful plants spilling over the edges. The soft movement. The elegant texture. That's no accident. Professional designers know something many home gardeners overlook. Beautiful containers aren't created by flowers alone. They're created by contrast. And few plants create better contrast than Carex, also known as sedge. At first glance it almost seems too simple. No giant blooms. No flashy colors. No dramatic fragrance. Many shoppers pass it without a second glance. Yet once it's planted, something unexpected happens. Suddenly every neighboring plant looks better. Large Hosta leaves feel bolder. Bright flowers appear even brighter. Dark foliage becomes richer. It's like adjusting the lighting in a photograph. Nothing changed, but everything looks more beautiful. Its slender leaves sway with the slightest breeze, adding movement that keeps containers looking alive, even on days when nothing is flowering. That movement is something photographs can never capture, but visitors notice immediately. Another advantage, many varieties stay attractive long after flowering plants have faded. While other containers begin looking tired by late summer, Carex continues adding structure well into autumn, and in many climates, even through winter. If you're new to growing it, look for varieties like Evergold, whose golden-striped leaves brighten shady patios, or Ice Dance, with crisp white-edged foliage that pairs beautifully with almost any perennial. And unlike many ornamental grasses, Carex rarely becomes unruly. Once a year, simply remove old leaves before fresh growth begins. That's often all the maintenance it needs. Some of the most elegant containers you've ever admired probably had Carex hiding somewhere inside them. Not because it steals attention, because it quietly improves everything around it. Now here's something surprising. The next plant does the exact opposite. Instead of disappearing quietly into the background, it becomes the very first flower to wake up after winter. Sometimes, before winter is even over. Plant 10 Hellebore, the flower that defies winter. Picture this. It's late February. The trees are still bare. The lawn hasn't turned green. Most gardens look completely lifeless. Then you glance toward a container near your front door, and discover flowers already blooming. Not tulips. Not daffodils. Not crocuses. A perennial that many gardeners don't expect to flower until they see it with their own eyes. Meet Hellebore. Often called the Lenten rose, this remarkable plant has built a loyal following for one simple reason. It refuses to wait for spring. While most plants remain dormant beneath cold soil, Hellebore quietly begins producing elegant blooms in shades of ivory, blush pink, burgundy, plum, and deep purple. Sometimes those flowers remain beautiful for nearly 2 months. That's an incredible performance from a plant blooming while much of the garden still looks asleep. But here's what makes Hellebore even more remarkable. The flowers are only half the story. Its rich evergreen foliage continues looking attractive throughout most of the year, giving your container structure long after flowering has finished. That means the pot never feels empty. Even in the quiet months, there's still something beautiful waiting outside. Hellebores also appreciate conditions that frustrate many flowering plants. Bright shade. Morning sunlight. Cool roots. Those same places where annual flowers often struggle are exactly where hellebores feel at home. One mistake catches many beginners, though. Planting them where intense afternoon sun bakes the leaves during summer. Do that, and the foliage quickly loses its rich appearance. Instead, think woodland. Filtered light. Cool soil. Gentle mornings. Under those conditions, hellebores can remain in the same container for well over a decade, rewarding you every year with flowers that arrive when the rest of the garden is still waking up. Some gardeners even say hellebores teach patience. The first year they're beautiful. The fifth year they're unforgettable. And that's exactly what perennial gardening is all about. Not instant results. Lasting ones. So far, we've met the designer's secret, and the flower that laughs at winter. But the next perennial is responsible for something completely different. People don't notice it first because of its flowers. They notice it because of its fragrance. Walk past it on a warm summer evening, and you'll instantly understand why it has been treasured for centuries. Coming up next, the perennial that actually performs better the less you fuss over it. Before we reveal the next plant, here's a question. Have you ever loved a plant so much that you accidentally killed it? It sounds strange, but one of the biggest reasons gardeners lose the next perennial is because they care for it too much. The less you spoil it, the happier it becomes. Plant 9. Lavender, the plant that thrives on neglect. Lavender has one of the most misleading reputations in gardening. People see its soft purple flowers, silvery leaves, and calming fragrance and assume it must be delicate. In reality, lavender is a survivor. For thousands of years, it has grown on rocky hillsides where the soil is poor, rainfall is unpredictable, and the summer sun is relentless. It didn't evolve to be pampered. It evolved to endure. That's why containers can actually become the perfect home for lavender. Unlike garden beds, containers let you recreate the exact conditions this Mediterranean plant loves. Sharp drainage. Lots of sunshine. Roots that never sit in water. Get those three things right, and lavender rewards you with far more than flowers. On a warm afternoon, lightly brush your hand across the foliage. Within seconds, the air fills with one of the most recognizable fragrances in the gardening world. It's not just pleasant. It's the plant's natural defense system, tiny aromatic oils stored inside the leaves and flowers. Interestingly, plants grown in slightly lean, drier conditions often produce even stronger fragrance than heavily fertilized ones. Nature has a clever way of rewarding restraint. And bees seem to know it. During peak bloom, a healthy lavender plant can become one of the busiest places in your entire garden, buzzing with honeybees, native bees, and butterflies from morning until evening. If you're planting in cooler climates, compact English lavender varieties such as Munstead or Hidcote are dependable choices. In regions with hot, humid summers, look for modern varieties bred specifically to tolerate those conditions. Now here's the mistake that shortens more lavender lives than anything else. Overwatering. Many gardeners water on a schedule instead of checking the soil. Lavender hates constantly wet feet. Allow the top few inches of soil to dry before watering deeply again. That simple habit often makes the difference between a struggling plant and one that thrives for years. After flowering, give it a light trim. Never cut into old woody stems. Only shape the fresh green growth. It's a 5-minute job, for a plant that can perfume your patio every summer for years to come. So far we've talked about beauty, fragrance, texture. But what if one plant could turn your container into a living wildlife sanctuary? The next perennial doesn't just attract pollinators, it feeds birds months after the flowers have disappeared. Plant 8. Coneflower, the plant that changes with the seasons. At first glance, coneflowers seem simple. Bold petals. Raised centers. Bright summer colors. Beautiful. Reliable. Nothing unusual. Until you stop looking only at the flowers. That's when you realize this plant never truly stops giving. During summer, its blossoms become magnets for butterflies. Native bees crawl across every flower collecting nectar. Honeybees work from bloom to bloom without pause. The container feels alive. But autumn tells a different story. Instead of rushing outside with pruners, leave the fading flowers exactly where they are. Those spiky seed heads that many gardeners remove. They're a winter buffet. Goldfinches cling to them. Chickadees pick through the seeds. Even after snow arrives, your container continues supporting wildlife long after annual flowers have disappeared. That's one reason coneflowers have become favorites among ecological gardeners. They're beautiful, but they're also useful. Modern breeding has transformed the classic purple coneflower into an astonishing range of colors. Fiery orange. Golden yellow. Ruby red. Soft white. Coral pink. Some even change shades as the flowers mature, giving a single plant multiple colors throughout the season. Despite their impressive appearance, they're remarkably forgiving. Hot summers rarely slow them down. A mist watering is usually forgotten. Strong sunlight only encourages heavier flowering. Containers actually help them stand out even more because nearby plants aren't competing for space or stealing the spotlight. And after several seasons, another reward appears beneath the soil. The root clump gradually expands, lifted in early spring, divided into healthy sections, and suddenly one plant becomes several. That's the quiet magic of perennial gardening. Time slowly transforms one purchase into an entire collection. We've already met plants that bloom before spring, fill the air with fragrance, and feed wildlife through winter. But the next perennial solves a problem almost every gardener has faced at least once. A dark corner, where nothing seems willing to grow. And somehow, it turns that forgotten space into one of the most beautiful parts of the entire garden. Coming up next, the undisputed king of shade containers. Have you ever noticed something strange? Walk through almost any garden center in midsummer, and the sun-loving plants are covered with blooms. Then look at the shade section. Most of it is just green. Many gardeners assume shade means giving up colorful, exciting containers. That's exactly where the next plant changes everything. Plant 7 Hosta, the shade giant that gets better every year. Every garden has that one frustrating spot. The porch that never gets enough sunlight. The patio hidden beneath a large tree. The quiet corner where every flowering plant seems to struggle. Most gardeners keep fighting nature. Experienced gardeners stop fighting, and start planting hostas. Hostas don't merely survive in shade. They transform it. Instead of producing dozens of short-lived flowers, they invest their energy somewhere far more impressive, massive, sculptural leaves that become larger and more dramatic every season. Some varieties unfold powder blue leaves that almost glow after a summer rain. Others develop creamy white edges that brighten even the darkest corner of a patio. Golden varieties seem to capture every ray of morning sunlight, making shady spaces feel surprisingly vibrant. From a distance, a mature hosta doesn't even look like a typical potted plant. It looks like living architecture. And here's something that surprises many beginners. Containers often solve one of the biggest problems hostas face in garden beds. Poor drainage. Hostas enjoy consistent moisture, but they hate sitting in waterlogged soil. A well-drained container gives you complete control over that balance. Healthy roots. Healthier leaves. Better growth. There's another unexpected benefit. Slugs. If you've ever grown hostas in the ground, you've probably discovered tiny holes appearing overnight. While containers won't eliminate slugs entirely, raising the plants off the ground makes them much easier to monitor and protect. Then comes summer. Elegant flower stalks rise above the foliage, carrying delicate lavender or white blossoms that hummingbirds seem unable to resist. Most people buy hostas for the leaves, the flowers become an unexpected bonus. But the greatest surprise happens underground. Every year the clump quietly expands. The leaves become larger. The plant becomes fuller. And after a few seasons, you can divide that single hosta into several healthy new plants. One purchase. Multiple containers. The longer you own a hosta, the more valuable it becomes. That's something annual flowers can never offer. So we've seen the king of shade. Now let's meet the queen of color. The next perennial proves you don't always need flowers to create a breathtaking container. Sometimes, leaves steal the entire show. Plant 6 Heuchera, coral bells, the 4-season masterpiece. If someone handed you a leaf-colored caramel, chocolate, deep burgundy, silver, or glowing lime green, would you believe it was real? Welcome to the world of Heuchera. Few plants have changed as dramatically over the past 2 decades. Modern breeding has transformed this one simple perennial into one of the most colorful foliage plants available. And unlike flowers that shine for a few weeks before fading away, Heuchera performs from spring until frost. Every single day. Its leaves create color that never depends on blooming. Imagine pairing dark purple foliage with bright yellow flowers. Or vibrant lime leaves beside deep blue blossoms. The contrast is stunning. Landscape designers use this trick constantly because colorful foliage makes neighboring plants appear even brighter. Then, just when you think Heuchera has finished impressing you, thin stems begin rising above the leaves. Tiny bell-shaped flowers dance in the breeze, attracting bees and hummingbirds without hiding the spectacular foliage beneath them. The plant somehow manages to do both jobs at once. Here's another reason experienced gardeners rely on Heuchera. It stays tidy. It doesn't spread aggressively. It doesn't overwhelm neighboring plants. It simply forms a neat mound that works beautifully in containers of almost any size. And in many regions, the leaves remain attractive throughout winter, meaning your patio doesn't suddenly become empty once cold weather arrives. The biggest mistake. Planting dark-leaved varieties in intense afternoon sun during the hottest part of summer. Too much heat can scorch the foliage. Morning sunlight with afternoon shade usually produces the richest colors. Every few years, gently divide mature clumps and refresh the potting mix. That's often all the maintenance required. It's remarkable how one plant, with flowers so small many people barely notice them, can completely transform the appearance of an entire container. We've covered plants that dominate shade, plants that shine through winter, plants that perfume the air, and foliage that steals the spotlight. But the next perennial has earned a completely different reputation. Some gardeners call it the flowering machine. Once it starts blooming, it almost refuses to stop. Here's a surprising gardening fact. Some plants treat flowering like a single performance. They bloom, take a bow, and they're finished for the season. The next perennial seems to have missed that memo. It blooms, then blooms again, and often keeps going until autumn. Plant 5 Coreopsis, the flower that refuses to quit. If happiness could grow in a container, it would probably look like Coreopsis. The first thing you'll notice is the color. Bright golden yellows. Soft buttery creams. Warm oranges. Deep ruby reds. Each flower looks like a tiny burst of sunshine balanced on slender stems. But the real magic isn't the first wave of blooms. It's the second, the third, and sometimes even the fourth. While many flowering perennials slow down after their initial display, Coreopsis has an incredible habit of producing new buds almost as quickly as old flowers fade. That's why experienced gardeners often describe it as a flower factory rather than simply a flowering plant. Imagine walking past the same container in June, July, August, and September, and still finding fresh blooms waiting to greet you. That's exactly what makes Coreopsis such an outstanding long-term performer. And unlike many heavy bloomers, it doesn't demand constant attention. It actually thrives in conditions that challenge more delicate flowers. Hot afternoons. Dry spells. Windy patios. Coreopsis simply keeps going. But here's a little secret that professionals use to stretch the display even further. Instead of removing flowers one by one, lightly shear the plant after the first major flush of blooms. Within weeks, fresh green growth appears, followed by another spectacular display. It's almost like pressing a reset button on summer. Pollinators love it just as much as gardeners do. Bees arrive almost as soon as the flowers open. Butterflies drift in throughout the day. Even tiny beneficial insects find shelter among the blooms, turning a simple container into a miniature ecosystem. As the years pass, mature clumps become larger and fuller. When they eventually need dividing, you'll gain several vigorous new plants without spending another dollar. A cheerful container today, an entire collection tomorrow. That's the quiet reward of choosing plants that grow with you instead of disappearing every winter. We've talked about plants that bloom for months. Now let's look at one that creates the opposite kind of impact. Instead of hundreds of small flowers, it produces giant floating spheres that stop people in their tracks. Plant 4 Agapanthus, the firework of the patio. Some plants politely decorate a patio. Agapanthus transforms it. As summer reaches its peak, thick flower stems begin stretching skyward. Higher, higher, until they tower above the foliage like elegant green spears. Then, almost overnight, each stem explodes into a perfect globe made of dozens of star-shaped flowers. From a distance, they resemble blue fireworks frozen in midair. Visitors notice them immediately. Neighbors ask what they are. Photographs hardly capture their true scale. And here's one of the biggest surprises about Agapanthus. Unlike many container plants that constantly beg for larger pots, this perennial actually enjoys having its roots slightly restricted. Many gardeners assume a cramped pot is a problem. For Agapanthus, it can be an advantage. Slightly crowded roots often encourage heavier flowering. That's why mature plants frequently bloom more spectacularly than newly planted ones. Patience truly pays off. Give it a sunny location where it receives at least 6 hours of direct light each day. Use a free-draining potting mix. Water deeply during active growth, then allow the top layer of soil to dry before watering again. Simple care. Extraordinary results. The long-lasting flower heads also make outstanding cut flowers, bringing weeks of color indoors while the remaining blooms continue decorating your patio outside. And after several growing seasons, another reward arrives. The underground clump slowly expands. Divided in early spring, and what began as one dramatic centerpiece can eventually become several. Imagine lining an entire pathway with Agapanthus, all descended from a single plant. That's the quiet power of perennial gardening. One good decision continues paying dividends for years. Only 3 plants remain. One fills shady corners with clouds of flowers. One quietly improves every container around it without demanding attention. And the final plant might just be the toughest perennial you'll ever grow. It survived drought, neglect, blazing summer heat. And somehow, it still looks better every single year. We've reached the final 3. At this point, you might think you've already seen the best. But these last plants earned their places for a reason. One creates flowers that seem to float in the air. One becomes more valuable every single year. And the final plant might be the closest thing gardening has to a plant it and forget it perennial. Let's continue. Plant 3 Astilbe, the plant that makes shade look expensive. Walk into a woodland garden in early summer and you'll notice something almost magical. Nothing feels loud. Nothing competes for attention. Instead, everything feels soft, peaceful, elegant. That's exactly the feeling Astilbe brings to a container. Unlike bold flowers that demand attention, Astilbe creates beauty through texture and movement. As summer begins, slender stems slowly rise above its finely divided, fern-like foliage. Then the buds open. Not into ordinary flowers, but into feathery plumes that almost look like colorful clouds suspended above the leaves. Every gentle breeze sets them in motion. That movement gives containers a living quality that's impossible to capture in photographs. White varieties brighten deep shade. Soft pinks create a romantic cottage garden feel. Deep crimson selections add dramatic contrast against green foliage. Whichever color you choose, the effect is graceful rather than overwhelming. One reason Astilbe performs so well in containers is something many gardeners never consider. Water control. In garden beds, thirsty tree roots often steal moisture before Astilbe can use it. Containers remove that competition. You control the watering. The plant gets exactly what it needs. Keep the soil evenly moist and mulch the surface if summers are especially hot. The reward is fuller foliage, stronger flower plumes, and a display that returns bigger each season. Even after flowering ends, the dried plumes continue adding texture well into autumn. Instead of looking messy, they create a soft architectural silhouette that many gardeners intentionally leave in place. After several years, divide the clump in early spring. One elegant container becomes 2. Then 4. And before long, those once empty shaded spaces begin telling a completely different story. The next perennial proves something fascinating. Sometimes the most beautiful plant in your garden isn't the one with the biggest flowers. It's the one that quietly becomes more impressive every single year. Plant 2 Brunnera, Jack Frost. The silver-leaf perennial that brightens shade all season. Most gardeners think flowers are what make a container beautiful. But experienced gardeners know something even more important. Light. Every successful container needs something that catches available light and reflects it back into the garden. Very few perennials do that better than Brunnera. Hardy throughout USDA zones 3 through 8, Brunnera Jack Frost produces some of the most remarkable foliage you'll ever see. Each heart-shaped leaf appears dusted with silver, while deep green veins create intricate natural patterns that look almost hand-painted. Even from across the yard, the foliage glows in shaded spaces where most plants simply disappear. In early spring, delicate sprays of tiny sky-blue flowers float above the foliage like miniature forget-me-nots, bringing gentle color just as the gardening season begins. But here's why Brunnera truly shines in containers. Unlike many flowering plants that fade after blooming, the spectacular foliage remains attractive from spring until frost. Every single day, the container continues earning its place on your patio. Brunnera also combines beautifully with almost every shade-loving perennial. Pair it with Japanese forest grass for flowing movement. Mix it with Heuchera for dramatic color contrast. Or combine it with Astilbe to create a professional landscape design worthy of a botanical garden. Once established, Brunnera asks for very little. Keep the soil evenly moist, protect it from harsh afternoon sun, and every few years divide the mature clump to create free new plants. One purchase today can quietly multiply into a stunning collection over time. And that's exactly what perennial container gardening is all about. Building a garden that becomes more beautiful every single year instead of starting over every spring. Plant 1 Japanese forest grass, Hakonechloa macra. The luxury container plant most gardeners have never tried. Have you ever noticed that some container gardens look expensive even when they're filled with only a handful of plants? The secret usually isn't bigger flowers. It's movement. Professional garden designers know that a container should never feel stiff or flat. It should feel alive. That's exactly why Japanese forest grass has become one of their favorite plants. Hardy in USDA zones 5 through 9, this graceful perennial naturally forms soft cascading fountains of narrow leaves that spill over the edges of containers like a golden waterfall. Every gentle breeze brings the entire plant to life, creating movement that annual flowers simply can't match. Even better, it actually performs best where many flowering plants struggle. Morning sun and afternoon shade are ideal, making it perfect for porches, woodland patios, shaded balconies, and north-facing entrances. One of the most beautiful varieties is Aureola, famous for its glowing golden leaves striped with rich green. In darker corners of the garden, those bright leaves almost seem to produce their own light. As autumn arrives, the foliage changes once again, developing warm shades of copper, orange, and bronze before winter dormancy. That means one container gives you 3 completely different displays throughout the year. Unlike fast-growing annual grasses that need replacing every spring, Japanese forest grass slowly becomes fuller and more elegant each season. After 3 or 4 years, a mature clump can easily be divided into several new plants. One beautiful container eventually becomes 2, then 4, then enough to create an entire designer-style shade garden without spending another dollar. If your goal is to make visitors stop and ask, "What is that beautiful plant?" This is one of the best container perennials you can grow. If there's one idea I hope you take away from today's video, it's this: the best container gardens aren't the ones that get replanted every spring. They're the ones that quietly become more beautiful every single year. A mature container filled with Japanese forest grass, Brunnera, Astilbe, Lavender, Coreopsis, Heuchera, Hosta, Coneflower, Agapanthus, Catmint, or Sedum doesn't lose value with time, it gains it. The plants grow fuller. The root systems become stronger. Many can be divided into free new plants. And instead of spending money replacing annuals year after year, you're building a collection that rewards you season after season. That's the real beauty of perennial container gardening. You're not decorating your patio for one summer. You're creating a living garden that evolves, matures, and becomes more impressive with every passing year. Start with just one container. Choose a perennial that suits your climate and the amount of sunlight you have. Give it a large pot, well-draining soil, and a little patience. A few years from now, you'll be amazed at how much it has grown, and how much money and effort you've saved along the way. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments which perennial you're excited to grow first. And if you'd like more science-backed gardening tips, plant guides, and low-maintenance ideas that help you grow a healthier, more beautiful garden, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.